Hello and welcome to Wiland Webinars, Unlocking the Power of Data Collaboration, How to Use Second and Third-Party Data for More Profitable Marketing. Thank you all for being here today as we discuss how to drive measurable results for your organization by utilizing second and third-party data collaboration tools. I'd like to introduce our data experts who will be participating today. Bruce Beagle is the Winterberry Group's Senior Managing Partner. Emma Nicoti is a Senior Vice President for Analytic Solutions at Wiland. And I'm Dennis Smith, Wiland's VP of Data Success. I'll be your MC today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar is being recorded, and you should all receive a link to that recording shortly after we wrap up today. Our chat today is private. I'll be moderating your comments and passing your questions to the panel. If we aren't able to answer your questions in today's session, someone will reach out to you personally to ensure you get the information that you need. If you have problems seeing or hearing any of the presenters, we suggest refreshing your browser. That may kick you out of the session, but you should be able to rejoin immediately. All right, with that out of the way, I'd like to take a moment to level set for our conversation. Emma, we're going to be talking about analytics, but that term really means different things to different people. It's a loaded term, right? So what's the definition or the context in today's discussion on data enrichment and predictive modeling?
For sure. First of all, hello, everyone. So today the way to think about analytics is it's what enables you to interpret and, more importantly, use any data that you have access to. It's just what makes your data actionable. Actionable is my word of the day today.
Excellent. So that's going to be very helpful for us as we dig into today's topic. Now, the Winterberry Group, Bruce, you structured some recent research around data collaboration and the data layer. I know you brought some information to share on that. Why don't you take it from there?
Right. Thank you very much. And this presentation is really a compilation of slides. All right. So we put together a number of reports, and I've pulled kind of highlights from each of those into just a quick set of slides. Really starting with, when we think about the data sector, we've come a long way. We basically went from a direct mail period, marketing service providers, data co-ops, but really ran through 2000. Then we started to add data exchanges, ECRM systems. We started to digify that data and add it. Everything was always additive. In the last decade, before this one, we started to go and add digital data that was being used for identity, for targeting, etc. And now we've got a whole set of platforms and tools that enable us to use all types of data. As we went through each of those eras, things started to change on us. One, and probably the most, has been privacy and regulation, and the notion of permission-based consent, especially around first-party data. And really, as some of this is driven by the regulatory environment, some of this is really driven by browsers and the browser competition. But a lot of it is overlaid by security and the investments we need to make. So there's really the data infrastructure, and the data services that we operate around. In the world of collaboration, which is the title of our session today, what we have started to see is brands partnering with other brands to share data, brands partnering with third-party data providers to enrich, enhance, with media owners to do overlap analysis, with media networks, whether it's retail or travel or financial. So there's a tremendous amount of first-party collaboration going on and third-party enhancement. And that has changed the infrastructure that we use. If we kind of simplify it, we say, all right, we have a data layer, which is that foundation where all of our structured, unstructured data is. That in turn powers up an intelligence layer. This is where we're doing our measurement. This is where we're doing decisioning, orchestration, applying the analytics that we were speaking about a moment ago. And then it gets passed off to activation and loops its way back. So it's a way to visualize the technology structure that we're using. Of course, what you're going to get is, as you start to dive deeper, is, oh, I've got an analytics data environment, I've got an identity graph, I've got a lake, I've got a warehouse. You know, how does all of this come together? It's not really a monolithic stack. What we've seen over the last 12 months is a little bit of simplification. You have a data lake, data warehouse, persistent first-party graph. This is where that first-party data is, that transaction data, that rich permission data that a brand possesses. If I want to start to activate it, I can activate from there into a CDP. And CDPs, which were originally going to be that warehouse, they are not, have become both a place that you bring your real-time, your digital data, you mix it with your PII, and you push it out for decision and orchestration. So the CDP actually lives between the data layer and the intelligence layer. And then most recently, what we've started to see, in addition to co-ops, which were really the original collaboration platforms, we have seen data collaboration, data clean rooms, as they say, and we are watching these start to proliferate. And if that's not enough, with Gen AI, we're starting to see large language models that are part of that intelligence layer, but point back not only at all of our audience information, it's also pointing at our content information. So, sounds really easy, it's not. Data accuracy and the complexity of integrating all those tools, managing data governance, having the right organization and talent, and getting your use cases prioritized. You know, things that we think about as we approach what should we have as a brand or as a provider. And probably the biggest challenge is data silos. Like, you go into an organization, they don't know where their data is. So if you can solve for that one, that gives you your best chance of being able to leverage marketing analytics. What we know, audience media fragmentation is going to continue. We're going to continue to see a real drive for personalization, and we're going to get more privacy regs. And underpinning all of this, machine learning, generative AI. What we're thinking about is, well, who's responsible? We did a survey, and what we found was, well, marketing operations, marketing tech said they're responsible. Customer experience said they're responsible. Marketing, so there is not one group that is claiming ownership, but everybody will tell you they're responsible. So that's a little bit of a problem as well. The other thing that we're thinking a lot about is, where's this investment going to come? And we surveyed across the UK and Europe and the US, and depending on the size of your organization, you know, will really drive that spend. The more records you are going to store, the more channels you're going to integrate, the more you're going to spend. But we see that spend continuing to go up in almost all of the markets. And the other part is making it work. We're going to see an increase in the investment in data services. You can read through a bunch of this current state outlook for data collaboration, which is a piece we published with Adobe, but also really demystifying this entire data layer. But this, you know, as we talk about data, it is sitting on this foundation, and the foundation is pretty incomplete. And I will come back to Dennis and Emma.
Thank you, Bruce. That's very helpful. You know, and I think it's very helpful the way you've outlined it, the three layers: the data layer, the intelligence layer, and the activation layer. So let's spend a little bit of time around the whole idea of potentially outsourcing those layers to others, and if that is a decision that an organization is going to make. I mean, how does an organization guarantee seamless integration of that, right? They all need to be under one roof. Can they be built out one layer at a time? Can we go just a little bit deeper in that piece?
Well, when we ask people, are you doing analytics, for example, by yourself? About 10% said they were. Like, everybody's using partners for analytics. They're using partners to help stand up their Adobe, their Salesforce, their Treasure Data, their other platforms. we expect that this will continue. Nobody's got enough skills in-house to stay current on all of these technologies, all these platforms. And your analytics team, which will understand how to use it, they're also not your technology team.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, Emma,
Mhm.
how does a marketing team determine whether to sort of influence that decision to keep analytics in-house, outsource, or find the combination? I mean, I think that's where it really is going. It is a combination, but what are some of those considerations that you're seeing?
Yeah, so when I get asked this question, it's really what you want to do first is make sure your data is living up to its full potential, right? Like that's absolutely the baseline. So at that point, you kind of need to take into account your need for flexibility versus your need for speed. There are absolutely organizations, especially organizations earlier in their life cycle, earlier in their data cycle, where standard reports and analyses that are done by a couple of business intelligence analysts will be sufficient and can be run in-house. But organizations that have grown a little bit have started building what Bruce is talking about. They need a little more agility. They need to be able to answer new, more complex questions more on the fly. That's when it's time to work with someone who's already built a team that has the integration and responsiveness that you kind of need.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Bruce, I think you're also spot on with the idea that the resource levels at clients who are trying to do this very, very well, the sort of the juice being worth the squeeze principle applies, right? There's a significant investments in terms of resources and in terms of people and in terms of competency of bringing up to you. You can't possibly have all of that under one roof in most cases, and so it really does boil down to how do I get the best of both worlds, right?
Or you'll get people who claim that they do all that, and the reality is they don't. So then projects move really slowly.
For sure, and
just being incomplete. So understanding for each of the components, who really knows what they're talking about, and for each of the use cases, who are the participants within that, and making sure they're all involved.
to that end, we're talking about third-party data today in a lot of respects, but if an organization is deciding to outsource some of that data collection on third-party elements, like what are best practices around testing that data from an outside partner? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
I think testing might be Emma.
Well, I was going to see what you wanted to say first. So, yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question, right? But really the first step is seeing how well it aligns with the org or the data that the org already has in place. It would be crazy to say that every piece of data is useful for every organization, is a good match for every org. And the more you add, the more complex it gets. So, there's all kinds of reporting you can do. Dennis, I know you're really familiar with that, to look at it really to try and identify how that match makes sense. There's also the question of, does it make too much sense? One of the things with predictive analytics that we need to leave room for is that mathematical layer that can say, this makes sense whether you think so or not. So it is a balancing act to say, yeah, absolutely, if I'm selling women's clothes, I think the demographic information around women, sure, but also there could be publications, there can be all sorts of other things that are useful. So yeah, Dennis, I know you have some reporting things that you're very familiar with.
Yeah, and so I'm sort of at the tip of the spear, certainly at Wiland on these sort of data evaluation, big data evaluations, and when my clients or my prospects are thinking about how they evaluate a data partner, I mean the most basic things that they're looking for is, can some of this information that my partner is providing to me confirm what I already know about my client? So it's this sort of this beginning level of a truth set. All of our clients are asking about match rates and coverages, trying to close the gaps. I would say the most forward-thinking of our clients have built out infrastructures that allow them to test outside data against truth sets that they have. they're building in-house models or looking at incorporating those data elements in their in-house models for either churn or lifetime value or best customer cross-sell, upsell. But then I think the other piece that is a little bit underrated in the evaluation process is really along the way gauging the flexibility and the helpfulness of the partner, right? I don't know about y'all, but been doing this for a long time, and life is really too short to be dealing with people that
Yeah.
are hard to deal with, right? So
Yeah.
that's I think what we're seeing, and really the logical conclusion is data enhancement is about filling those information gaps, right? It's about prospects. And so what, Emma, your perspective on that? How do our clients, how do our big brands, how do they know what they don't know? What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it is what you already spoke about, but then a lot of it has to do with back to the way that you test. So one of the things that either my teams support or that we recommend people try to do in-house is, to your point, test a truth set. And one of the best ways to do that is to go back in time and say, if I had known this piece of data 2 years ago, would I have been able to predict what this person was going to do a year after that? And that's the kind of thing that it can be a little sophisticated for some orgs to try and do in-house because you have to do some timing things and you can always get help with it. But that really helps you understand, if I bring in these 100 things and I say, I'd known all of these 2 years ago, maybe 5 of them would have helped. 5 of them would have led you to the person who ended up taking your offer or making the donation or whatever it was. So for me, that's one of the most powerful methods, because that's really the only way you can test on the ground without actually having to go out and do it in real time.
I think that's it's really good information. That's a really good way to think about it. I think some of the other considerations that we see in the field are around the idea of being able to do some level of prescriptive data analysis on the front end that basically gives a client a perspective of the possible, right? So it's the idea that we, for instance, have an offering that's a prescriptive data analysis where we ingest the client's data, we match it through our identity graph to all the data that we have, and then we show them what makes the segment or the audience unique versus a national baseline and where the pockets of opportunity, right? And so that frequently that level of first step in an engagement or in an effort like that, what it does is it gets the ideas sort of flowing in the client's mind around what is possible. Table stakes today, I mean, ubiquitous is things like demographic and interest information, but frequently we're able to show, and I'm sure other partners are able to show, the power of maybe AI created elements around consumer consumption, for instance, or propensities around a certain customers or certain segment to do certain things in the marketplace. So long-winded way of saying we like to start with shedding a light on what they don't know and they couldn't possibly know, because first-party data just doesn't allow that type of insight in many cases.
It's also learning how to ask the right questions.
Mhm.
I think too often people don't know, and so having a data strategist
Mhm.
in the room, not just a data scientist, because that strategist does help build that bridge over how to communicate it into the use cases or into the outcomes
Mhm.
that the client's looking for. And also you have to have somebody who can speak to compliance and data governance, because it always comes up.
That's
Yeah.
table stakes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think you do, Bruce, you point out a really interesting and good dynamic is that just from my experience, people that are very, very well versed in data science and analytics are not necessarily well versed in the marketing use of data and the myriad ways in which a brand might want to create and message to any given consumer. So I think you're spot on. on that is that part of this is having the right stakeholders in the room when you're talking about it.
Yeah. As a person who has spent 6 years now building a team here of people who can do both, can tell you they are somewhat unicorns. So it's really great to find them. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's mostly our job to help connect the dots too, in organizations, and sort of chart a path for success for clients who are just embarking on this on this journey. I mean, some big brands that we work with, they've got it figured out, right? They've made investments, they've done all this and set themselves up for good success going forward. But more often than not, we find gaps in that, and so that's part of why we're in business. I don't know what do you think about that, Bruce? But
I think because the data that's available keeps changing. Either it's changing because it's becoming restricted, or it's becoming available because there are new channels opening up, and making sure that those feedback loops from the data are repopulating the files. And there's so much we can learn because so many of our behaviors are online, not exclusively online. So they are going to also be in the offline world. They are also going to be in the retail world. And the more options you have, I think, as an analytics practitioner, say, depending on what those questions are, as long as I know that there's enough data, it's got to be accurate, but you also need enough coverage.
yeah, for sure. So we've talked a lot about first party data already too. I mean, all brands that we deal with, they know they need it. They're trying to find ways to collect more of it. But I'm interested in y'all's perspective around why first party data is insufficient to drive some marketing outcomes, like in acquisition space. Bruce, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Probably the biggest problem is, unless you happen to be named Amazon or Walmart, perhaps, you are likely to suffer from an insufficiency of data. You know, direct marketers, we have always been collecting data, but if you're in CPG, who are now some of the heaviest users, you didn't have that direct relationship. So you had to get an enhanced relationship. And so I think the lack of volume, and then it's all of those attributes that you think about that, hey, why do I need 10,000? I don't need 10,000. I need the right 10 or the right 20, but how do I know that I have the right ones? So I think it's both coverage, accuracy, and the depth of the data to supplement what somebody has in their first party.
Yeah. And I would add that when you think about, what we've always known about the customer journey, plus what we have learned when digital marketing really started showing us more information about touch points and that kind of thing, people are understanding more and more how much you need to do for your customer or your donor before they become your customer or your donor. And if you're only working with first party data, they're a blind spot for you.
Absolutely. And Bruce, I like when you mentioned the CPG companies. I mean, COVID was the big wake up call for a lot of these big CPG clients, because suddenly their access to information about their customers was really non-existent because people weren't going into stores and the channels were changing and all those kinds of things. So I think that's right. And Emma, I'd be also interested in understanding, how that third party data then is utilized in terms of how it can improve our clients' modeling routines and things like that.
Yeah. So if you think about the way that modeling has gotten more sophisticated, right? We've been talking about this. Bruce has mentioned it quite a few times. Modeling is now able to sort through a lot more things, but that is not the only reason that second and third party data are really powerful. So if you think about me, actually, we were talking about this right before the webinar started. I am buying a house. I am under contract for a house. I have not done any change of address. I have not changed the location of my subscriptions. I haven't moved like my internet or any of those things, right? So that is not available data. The only people who know, other than now all of you, that I am buying a new house are the furniture stores where I've started ordering furniture that has a very long lead time. That information is incredibly valuable to a model because it can say, look, we know, not only do we know that this is now something that she has done, it can look back and say for everyone else in this database who has made these same purchases, we understand that this means that she's probably this far out from this and this and this. And now this model knows that I am likely a new mover, and everybody wants new movers, right? Because let me tell you, we just bleed money. And so, right, that's a piece of information that only that one first party, only that furniture store has right now. And a model can't use it if they don't have it. So getting it from someone else really enables the models to do the kind of work that they need to do.
Such a great point. Such a great point. You know, and the other thing I'm curious about today really is around, you know, that's a modeling application, right? So the ability to predict behavior based on past behavior, but there's also needs for data around customer segmentation, building marketing audiences, and things like that. What are your thoughts on that piece too?
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm on a roll now. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'll pilot him right after you.
Um, you know, with customer segmentation, it can be just as useful, right? So I keep talking about kind of that pre-organization interface because I love the predictive kind of the acquisition part of things. But the customer segmentation is just as powerful because if you try and segment a customer, and this is a pet project of mine actually at Wiland right now, if you try and segment a customer using just first-party data, a lot of your customers look very similar, right? Because everyone buys something from you and all of your things have something in common. But when you start being able to add those additional layers, the psychographics, the demographics, and where they spend the rest of their money, they really do start forming these kind of beautiful clusters. And if you look at any of the kind of segmentation products that are available in the market, they all take into account national level data. They all take into account things that are not just first party. So it's critical for that as well.
I think the other part that we're seeing come up more and more is who should I suppress?
Mm-hmm.
Building a suppression bot to exclude people, maybe because they bought, or maybe because those behaviors, like not wasting all my media spend, but really focusing and saying, all right, these are the people I do want, and these are the ones I want to suppress. So we're starting to see more of that. I think the other thing we're starting to see is a lot more collaboration on measurement, because I think we have a measurement gap.
I would completely agree with that. Well, and that brings us a whole nother discussion, right? So, but so some of what we've talked about, it really at high level categories of data that are important for what our clients are trying to accomplish. But let's talk a little bit more about maybe the most predictive type of data that we've found. It really is around consumer purchase data and around spending signals. And what's your reasoned opinion, Emma, on why that's so powerful as an input to the analytics systems that we have?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately, I think demographics are great, psychographics are fabulous, but where I spend my money says more about me than almost anything else, right? Because the rest of it are things that I share with billions of people or hundreds and thousands of other people and things that I could speak to. But if I say I love something, do I buy it? So personally, when I'm building a model, if I can have transactional data, if I can see what you did with your wallet, that to me shows what you're actually doing in the world.
I think if you can also understand what's in their wallet. So
Also,
understanding it's great that I look at Maseratis. That may not be in my budget. You know, and so there are hobbyists, there are lots of signals that we see, but also the ability to pay and how you pay.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think frequently our clients are understanding that they're bringing that up. So it's not just the affinity for a particular brand or a particular thing in the marketplace, but it really is I had an old colleague that used to tell me, "You are what you buy," right? That's who you are, and you can say who you are all you want, but you really are who you buy. And so, um, besides purchase data, what categories are y'all seeing that are the most likely to drive revenue-focused KPIs for clients when they're embarking on this journey? What other categories do you see, Bruce, Emma?
I'll turn it over to Emma for a second so I can turn the light back on that just went automatically off in my office.
Sure. Yeah, so I did briefly mention demographics and psychographics. I think those are the two most common. So demographics, just your age, how much money you make, where you live, how much money your neighbors make, all that stuff that at least at some level, right? At least on a census level is known about people. And then the other one are the psychographics, which, like I said, can be very useful. I can say, I can respond to surveys, I can sign petitions, I can do all kinds of things that indicate the kind of person I want to be. I can search for Maseratis, which indicate that I am the kind of person who likes Maseratis. And the psychographics are super useful, right? Because you don't want someone who doesn't know what a Maserati is, if that's your market. So I think those are kind of the two big categories for me.
And I think browsing behavior is the one that we're really starting to see. So having all the geodemo psycho information, but also what have they been looking at to get some of that recency? And just because they're looking at it again, do they have the capability to purchase it? And where did they look for it? Because if Emma was buying furniture, but she's buying furniture 3 towns over, she's also likely to be moving farther away and giving, because if she's moving in town, she may just, keep the same, service providers for cable and, the lawn and everything else.
Yep.
No, I think you're spot on, and how I've been thinking about it with our clients is if you think about the trillions of dollars in spending behavior across 254 million or so U.S. marketable consumers, and then you think about all of the connections between people and people, people and brands, brands and brands, that spider web that blows out. It's literally trillions and trillions of signals that can give an idea or an indication into intent. And so all this to say, it isn't just enough to understand demographics and firmographics and psychographics and spend. It's how do you make sense around what all these signals are telling me, and what are the most important signals? Bruce, to your earlier point, I can't possibly store and utilize, thousands of elements every day. It's just not practical in today's environment. How do I hone in on the right ones? And so part of what my job is at Wiland is to help our clients understand that. And I'm sure that you, Bruce, you do the same thing, right?
Yeah, we see it, and it's different in different verticals. Like if I know that you belong to the gym, it's highly predicted that you're going to buy sporting equipment and you're going to need, sneakers, et cetera. So the linkages between the types of products that people buy, I think is really important. And more of that information is available on the third party. If you own the gym, you know about your gym members. Maybe you survey them. But if you also know what they bought at the sporting goods store, or you start to tie these things together to build a better picture. And I don't think anybody needs a 360-degree view of anything, but a better picture is probably the most important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you also bring up a good point. Many of our clients are using that type of signal data to inform like product strategies. What new products to your gym example, if I'm a gym owner, and I know that all of my, or a good amount of my my gym members, have a yoga bent, or they also are spending in these different categories. They might choose to run their business a little bit different, offer more products and services to to their clients in order to maximize the opportunity and make their customers delightfully happy. So I think that's also a good thing. So let's get down to I used this phrase yesterday in a client meeting, but it's great, but if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense, right? So whether you keep things in-house or whether you outsource some combination, how should our clients be thinking about or validating the ROI on any particular data investment? What kind of things should they be considering around that?
I think you have to be, first you have to understand the creative. Very few offers don't have some creative element. And so as you're testing, you have to say, all right, what will my control be? Is my control the data this time? Or is my control the content? Or am I going to mix and match? So you really have to have a strong testing plan. And then it's, okay, how do I beat? Like ultimately with we've done a lot of work in the financial services. And it is just you test and you test and you test.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing that what machine learning has enabled is this ability to test rapidly. And not just test on the audience side, but test on with creative intelligence. And so the goal, we want to see performance. We're moving away from I need impressions to I need performance. I want outcomes. So tell me which outcomes. It's not always the conversion, but it's signals that lead to conversion. And so when I'm looking at, it goes back to looking at your use cases and saying, right, what's most important to me? Is it new customer acquisition? Is it cross-sell, upsell? Is it service and retention? Like you need to go through and say, if there are, and we've built use case maps, if there are 150 different marketing use cases, and you get that when you get up to some of these enterprises, what are the 20 or 30 that are most important to drive success in my business? And focus on having the right infrastructure, the right talent, and the right data to drive those. Get your quick wins.
Emma, you have a perspective on that too? Anything to add around that?
Honestly, no, Bruce nailed it. I mean, for me, I think the most important part is that knowing what you want to measure, right? Because looking back on it and saying, well, that probably could have been, you're like, no. Set your measurements in advance, right? That's what you want to know. And that's the biggest thing for me.
I think go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, but part of the challenge we're seeing right now, as we lose identifiers, the signals that are coming back have gotten weaker. So it's harder to measure, which means you're spending more time building models with less data, which means your analytics has to work harder.
And then hence idea, sometimes you need the cavalry, right? You need help on that. I think both what y'all said is spot on. I would just say that how I'm thinking about it when we're talking to clients, it starts with a business issue. So it starts with a problem or a defined sort of thing. There's usually a performance issue around that. So how can the client actually solve this business issue that they have internally, and what are the investments, what are the hindrances to do it, and then it becomes transparent around well, here is a way to solve for it, and here is a plan, here's a test and learn methodology where it's whether you call it crawl, walk, run, or whether you call it, hey, we're gonna here's the journey, but all that to say, that's I think where the value that we bring, and I think other partners bring to that equation.
Yeah.
Hey, I think we're approaching time, and we wanted to leave some time for answering questions that we received in the chat. Before we dig into our Q&A, you can download a copy of today's presentation by clicking on the link in the chat box. And let's look at we've been collecting the questions from the audience, and one of the first questions we have, and I think Bruce, I'd like to direct this one to you first. But it's around how an organization decides on which second-party data environment are best for them. Data clean room, data warehouse, CDP, co-op. What are the considerations? I guess is the question.
They have different use cases, so there's a different purpose. I might join a co-op I might even join 2 or 3 co-ops, which is typical. But I'm joining that so that I can build out the amount of transaction data that I see. I might use a clean room so that I can do overlap analysis with a media partner, with a publisher, and say, all right, the audience that I have, do they actually have that audience in their segments? So, but I'm not likely, I'm using that, but I'm not activating directly from that particular solution. So when I think about solutions, I think about what is the purpose behind it? Am I increasing the availability of data for my analytics? Am I understanding what that publishing or media partner might have? The other challenge that we're seeing right now with data collaboration is if somebody's using clean room number 1 and somebody's using clean room number 2, and number 1 and number 2 don't speak to each other, you're going to need identity as a bridge to make this work together. And while brands may get away with only having 2 or 3 clean rooms, if you want to be in the Google world, you are going to have to go through Ads Data.
Yeah.
If you want to go through Amazon, like the big gardens have their own, and then you need kind of the more general ones. So you're not getting away with just one solution. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is one of the first things we recognize. And if you're a publisher, the brand comes to you and says, well, we're using, the Google Clean Room, or we're using LiveRamp or whatever, it's like, you've got to support that if you want their business. So the complexity that we are seeing is increasing. And the speed that you can deploy is getting faster. So it's both more complicated, but easier to do.
What about some of the things I'm thinking about, Bruce, are sort of the considerations for privacy, data security, those types of considerations that a brand is going to have to get over. What, do you have any guidance on that?
We are, well, first, security. Like, nothing else matters. Like, you could have the most permission data in the world, but if it's not secure and you have data leakage, the costs are tremendous. So securing the data, which has led to a lot of discussion about, are there solutions where my data does not move, where it can be encrypted and only the keys move? So that is part of that conversation. But if you are not consent first and permissioned, you should not be touching data. Like the risks, yes, right now they're targeting the big social networks, the walled gardens, etc., because they have the ability to pay, but you can't afford to pay. So you have to understand the provenance of that data. Where did it come from? Who truly owns the permission and the consent, and what is permissible use? So those are things that regardless of what we can do with all this technology, if we don't have that, everything stops or should stop.
Also spot on. I mean, I think the other thing I'm talking to clients about is there's this conflict between, like you mentioned, Bruce, the ability for one clean room to talk to another clean room, for instance, that the bridge. And what I'm seeing a lot of our chief privacy officers saying, well, we're trying to minimize the amount of places where we actually send our first party data for this type of solution. So there's also these considerations around what, how do you balance that risk play versus just technology catching up to make it all actionable. So
this is the conversation around identity.
Yeah.
Can I de-identify that information so I can just look and compare the keys? So my data is not moving at all. Or if it moves once and it doesn't move multiple times. And yes, when you're in Amazon and it moves from an S3 bucket to another S, it's moving. So you have to,
it's dirty secret. Yeah.
You have to listen and really kind of go through the mechanics and be really good friends with your privacy and compliance people.
Well said. Hey, so before we wrap up, I'd like to ask both of you just at least one question about the future. So be interested in your perspective on how data collaboration, data enhancement will look a year or two down the road. Any big changes? I mean, I think we've highlighted some of that in the thing, but this is your opportunity to sort of leave the parting shot of what the future will look like.
Told my internal team yesterday, we had a company all hands, and I said, 2 years from now, when generative AI, in combination with machine learning, is being used to pull both audience and creative together, we are going to find far more use. And the two groups that manage that are not the same people. So organizations are going to have to collapse. And that is, it's easier to buy technology and buy data than it is to change your work. So while I think the opportunity will be there, it will be a little slower than we think.
That's so interesting because mine is about AI as well. And really what I see is people getting very excited about it and getting a little bit ahead of themselves. I mean, people who are using it appropriately, people who understand what bringing machine learning, what bringing some large language models into their organization means. That's one thing. I think we're seeing a lot of organizations a little bit out over their skis on it. So I think over the next couple of years, we're going to be seeing what the correction for that looks like. And I'm very interested to see that.
Yeah. I think well said on both your parts. I don't have anything to add. Y'all are the brains of this operation. I'm sort of the point guard, if you will. So I don't have anything else to add here. But I do want to say thank you to our to Bruce and Emma. I also want to say thank you to our audience for this. That's all the time that we have for today. Hope that our attendees are taking away some actionable advice. How you can leverage data layering and things like that. So the last little bit is, for those of you watching, you can learn more about Wiland specifically and how we help brands and agencies unlock the power of marketing data by clicking on the link in the chat box now that we've posted. As a registered attendee, you'll be notified by email when the webinar is available online for viewing again to share with your colleagues. If you asked a question in the chat that we weren't able to get to, one of our presenters, this guy, will respond to you directly via email. And if this conversation prompted any ideas or questions for you, please, you can visit wiland.com. You can email us at info@wiland.com. We'll be happy to provide more resources or answer any questions that you have. Again, thanks for being here today. Hope that the information we've shared is valuable. And I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Dennis, Emma, thank you. And thanks, Wiland team, for allowing me to collaborate with you.
Of course. Nice to talk to you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.